The holidays are meant to be a time of joy and togetherness. But in 2019, something went horribly wrong for the Todt family in the picturesque community of Celebration, Florida. After weeks of no contact, police entered their home in January 2020 to discover a gruesome scene: the bodies of mom Megan, children Alek, Tyler, and Zoe, and their dog, all murdered. The only survivor was the father, Anthony Todt, who had been living with the corpses. This is the tragic story of the Todt family murders. By all appearances, the Todts were a picture-perfect family chasing the American dream. Anthony Todt was a successful physical therapist. His wife Megan stayed home with their 3 children: 13-year-old Alek, 11-year-old Tyler, and 4-year-old Zoe. After living in Connecticut for many years, the family relocated to Celebration, Florida, a charming town developed by Disney. They settled into a spacious rental home on Reserve Place in 2017. Friends and neighbors knew the Todts as a tight-knit, loving bunch. The kids were polite and talented, excelling in school and music. Alek played the piano, while Tyler and Zoe took dance classes. Megan was a devoted mother, shuffling the kids to activities and supporting their hobbies. Anthony was an involved dad, coaching the boys' soccer teams and volunteering with special needs children. The family frequented Disney World and had annual passes. From the outside, their life looked idyllic, but behind the happy facade, the Todts were slowly crumbling. Megan battled health issues, getting diagnosed with Lyme disease in 2017 after a tick bite. The illness sapped her physically and mentally. Once an outgoing, active mom, she grew more withdrawn and struggled with depression. Anthony was dealing with his own demons. His physical therapy practice in Connecticut, which he commuted to weekly, was floundering. Unbeknownst to the family, he had started inflating bills and charging insurance for treatments patients never received, trying to keep the business afloat and fund their lifestyle. Cracks in the foundation. The Todts' picture-perfect life began to crumble in 2019. Megan's health worsened. Meanwhile, Anthony's fraud scheme caught up with him. His Connecticut practice was shuttered, and he found himself hundreds of thousands in debt, drowning in lawsuits and threats of losing his license. The pressure took a toll on the family. Once fixtures in the Celebration community, they pulled away, no longer attending town events or chatting with neighbors. When school started in the fall, Megan didn't sign the kids up, telling people they would stay in Florida for homeschooling. It was out of character for the education-focused mom. Relatives also noticed the normally responsive Todts weren't returning calls or messages. When they did reply, their texts were short and strange, uncharacteristic of their usual communication style. As the holidays approached, there was radio silence from the Todts. Megan's family in Pennsylvania hadn't heard from her since before Thanksgiving. They left voicemails, sent emails, but got no response. Gifts they mailed to the kids in early December sat untouched. They contacted the sheriff's office in Florida, requesting a welfare check. Deputies went to 202 Reserve Place on December 29th, but reported back that they didn't see anything suspicious. They couldn't enter the home without cause. But in Connecticut, there was an unsettling development. A federal arrest warrant had been issued for Anthony Todt. The healthcare fraud allegations had escalated into serious charges. Agents notified local authorities in Florida, and on the morning of January 13th, they converged on the Todt home, hoping to take Anthony into custody. A house of horror. The scene that greeted agents and deputies at 202 Reserve Place was unlike anything they'd witnessed. From outside, the 2-story house looked pristine, its white picket fence gleaming in the winter sun. But inside was a house of horror. A pungent smell of decomposition permeated the rooms. In the master bedroom, they discovered Megan, lifeless in her bed, a rosary clasped in her hand. The bodies of 11-year-old Tyler and 4-year-old Zoe were in their beds as well, decomposed beyond recognition. 13-year-old Alek was found on the floor nearby. They had been dead for weeks. In the midst of this gruesome scene was Anthony Todt, the only family member still alive. He was incoherent and lethargic, having consumed a massive amount of Benadryl in an apparent suicide attempt. It was clear he had been living with the corpses of his wife and children, even sleeping in the same room. Investigators also discovered the remains of the family's dog Breezy curled up in her bed. The news of the murders sent shockwaves through Celebration and beyond. The brutal killings stood in stark contrast to the town's carefully curated image of idyllic family life. Neighbors reeled with the realization that they'd been living next to a house of death, while relatives grappled with the unthinkable loss. How could a father wipe out his entire family in such a violent way? What darkness had overtaken this once happy home, a troubled past? As investigators get into Anthony Todt's background, a picture emerged of a man with a troubled history. Born in 1975, Anthony grew up in a tumultuous household. When he was just 4 years old, his father was arrested for a shocking crime, hiring a hitman to kill Anthony's mother. The assassination plot was unsuccessful, but Anthony witnessed the violence, an early trauma that experts say could have planted the seeds for future dysfunction. Despite this rough start, Anthony seemingly defied the odds. He became a successful physical therapist, married his college sweetheart Megan, and started a family. They settled in Connecticut, built a thriving practice, and had 3 children. Friends described them as loving and involved parents. Anthony appeared to be the quintessential family man, but the cracks were always there beneath the surface. Anthony confessed to struggling with depression and thoughts of self-harm from a young age. As an adult, he masked his mental health issues, presenting a happy face to the world. But inside, he felt like a failure, terrified of losing the perfect life he had built. The fraud at his practice started small. An inflated bill here, an extra charge there. But soon it snowballed into a massive scheme, with Anthony stealing tens of thousands from insurance companies to keep up appearances and please his family. When the house of cards finally collapsed in 2019, something in Anthony seemed to snap. Saddled with insurmountable debt, his license in jeopardy, perhaps he decided that if he couldn't provide the life his family wanted, they were better off dead. In his disturbed mind, family annihilation became preferable to facing consequences for his actions, a senseless act. The exact timeline and nature of the murders remained hazy, complicated by Anthony's shifting stories. At first, he claimed to have no memory of what transpired, even suggesting Megan was the killer. But physical evidence and expert analysis told a different tale. Investigators determined the family was massacred in mid-December, with Megan and the children being drugged with Benadryl before they were stabbed and suffocated. In his confession, Todt claimed he and his wife talked to the children about dying and said the kids told them, "We want to die with you," the Sentinel reports. This chilling detail suggests that the entire family was involved in a murder-suicide pact, with the children allegedly agreeing to die alongside their parents. However, the veracity of this claim is questionable, given Anthony's history of shifting narratives and the physical evidence pointing to him as the sole perpetrator. The viciousness of the act defied comprehension. Anthony used a kitchen knife on his wife and children. He placed crosses in their hands after they died, a perverse religious gesture. But he spared himself, making only a weak attempt at overdosing. For weeks, he carried on living in the house, celebrating Christmas and New Year's, acting as if everything was fine while his family lay dead around him. In the end, it was Anthony's own sloppiness that ended the charade. He used the family's phones to send strange texts to relatives, raising red flags. He ignored mail piling up and missed rent payments, drawing the attention of neighbors and the homeowner. If he hadn't been arrested for fraud, there was no telling how long he would have continued living in that house of horror, facing justice. After his dramatic capture, Anthony Todt was charged with 4 counts of homicide and 1 count of animal cruelty for killing the family dog. The case made national headlines, drawing comparisons to other infamous family murderers like Chris Watts. In April 2022, after lengthy delays due to the pandemic, Todt's trial finally began in Osceola County. In court, prosecutors painted a picture of a selfish, evil man who slaughtered his family to escape the consequences of his own misdeeds. They highlighted his inconsistent stories, his lack of remorse, and the brutality he unleashed on his loved ones. Anthony's defense team tried to argue that Megan was the real killer, and that he merely helped cover up the crime, but jurors didn't buy it. After a wrenching trial, Anthony Todt was found guilty on all counts. At his sentencing hearing, he finally broke down, offering a rambling apology and saying he wished it had been him instead of his family. But the judge was unmoved, calling Todt a destroyer of worlds who had shattered multiple lives. In a rare move, he tacked on an additional year to Anthony's life sentence for the animal cruelty charge, declaring that the dog's life was no less valuable. A community shattered. The Todt family murders left an indelible mark on the town of Celebration. The master-planned utopia, designed by Disney to embody old-fashioned family values, had become the site of an unthinkable atrocity. Neighbors were left reeling, wondering how such evil could happen in their idyllic community. Parents struggled to explain the tragedy to their children, who had played with the Todt kids. In the months and years that followed, the people of Celebration came together to honor Megan, Alek, Tyler, and Zoe. Candlelight vigils were held, and a memorial garden was planted in their memory. The high school where Alek would have attended created a scholarship in his name. Tyler and Zoe's dance studio held a benefit recital. There was an outpouring of love and grief for the family that was taken too soon. But even as the community mourned, there was an undercurrent of anger and betrayal. How could a father who seemed so devoted turn on his own flesh and blood? What signs had they missed that the Todts were in trouble? Some blamed Anthony's fraud, saying the pressures of white-collar crime had pushed him over the edge. Others pointed to Megan's mental health struggles, wondering if her husband had snapped under the strain of caretaking. But in the end, there were no easy answers. Lessons learned. If there is anything to be gleaned from the senseless tragedy of the Todt murders, it's the importance of looking beneath the surface. The Todts were the quintessential, perfect family, attractive, successful, involved in their community. But behind closed doors, they were crumbling under the weight of secrets, lies, and untreated mental illness. Perhaps if Anthony had been honest about his financial troubles, or Megan had gotten help for her depression, their story would have had a different ending. The case is also a sobering reminder that violence can happen anywhere, even in the most picture-perfect of places. The town of Celebration was custom-built to be a haven for families, a throwback to a simpler time. But evil can take root even in the sunniest of spots. The Todt murders shattered the illusion that any community is immune to darkness. Ultimately, the legacy of the Todt family is one of squandered potential and senseless loss. Megan, Alek, Tyler, and Zoe had their whole lives ahead of them. They should have grown up, pursued their passions, started families of their own. Instead, they became statistics, their bright lights snuffed out by the man who should have protected them at all costs. The fact that even the family dog wasn't spared speaks to the depths of Anthony's depravity. This was Agent Magpie. And remember guys, be good. And if you can't be good, be careful.